Well, the president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Michael Olawale-Cole, wants government to tackle a series of challenges facing the economic and business environment of the Nigerian economy. Dr. Olawale-Cole spoke on the state of the economy at the first media briefing of the Chambers for the year 2023. He spoke on issues around the domestic economy, global development, exchange rate issues, and of course, scarcity of FX, crude oil theft, interest rate hike, inflation, amongst others. We can go on and on. The LCCI boss wants the federal government to sustain targeted interventions in selected critical sectors like manufacturing, export, infrastructure, and of course, tackle insecurity.
With the persistent war in Ukraine and high spending by the government on the forthcoming general elections and census, we foresee a further rise in the inflation rate in the short term. We reiterate once again our position on the rising inflation that a rate hike will not tame the increasing inflation without complementary targeted financing of critical sectors like agriculture, power, energy, defense. I also say that government must invest more in boosting supply and cushioning the cost of production through the planned removal of fuel subsidies. Though this may cause inflation to rise in the short term, it remains the best economic decision to reduce our unsustainable debts we now carry as a nation.
Well, let's get a first-hand position and more breakdown of some of the economic issues highlighted by the LCCI in its 2023 economic outlook. Well, my guest is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Chinyere Amuna. Thank you so much, Dr. Amuna. It's good to have you live in the studio.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me.
Yes, I'd like to start on that note where the president stopped. Rising debt, which is staring us in the eyes. And we see that one of the ways we can address this is to take out the almighty subsidy that everybody is also worried about. Put this side by side. What are your thoughts around Nigeria's economy with regards to debt and this subsidy issue?
So when you think about debt, the debt that we project is supposed to accommodate the deficit. And the deficit is as a result of lowered revenue and increasing expenses or costs. So when you put that together, you have a deficit position that we are worried about, which is why we're thinking borrowing. Let's look at the elements. So one, we need to reduce our cost, and of course, the fuel subsidy is a major cost, but we also need to increase our revenue. And so we need to explore all the avenues to increase revenue. We've talked about diversification for a while. We need to encourage that to happen a bit more. The oil sector, which is a significant contributor to the economy, is dwindling in its performance. So when I look at the budget and I see that the expectation, one of the assumptions is that we'll make 1.69 billion barrels per day, I worry because currently, as at last year, it was about 1.2. So how are we going to scale up in the short term? So the government needs to do something definitely to improve our revenue position. We've also, as a chamber, advocated for government assets that lie in waste. How can we securitize these assets and put them up for equity investment? These are ways that we can improve our revenue position. Yeah. If we improve our revenue position and reduce our costs, then we'll probably get to the point where we're able to service our debt. The huge costs, apart from the subsidy, is also debt servicing, yes, which is a major cost.
Yes, 6.5 trillion.
Absolutely. So that is wiping out our revenue, little revenue that we have. So we need to do something about that itself, and that's not to borrow more. So when we are thinking the deficit, the budget deficit to this about 11 point something trillion, and we want to use debt to kind of shock that position. But perhaps we should look at equity and not just debt, or look at cheaper debt, okay, so that we position ourselves right. Government's already talking about restructuring the debt with CBN, and where everybody's saying, oh my goodness, 7 trillion we're looking at for the next government to deal with. But that's really depressing our economy. So these are factors that we need to consider as we go into the transition. Yeah. As we go into that phase, we need to think about these things.
Crude oil theft is something that worries me too as a Nigerian. Before now, I think we used to do almost 2 million barrels, and as of today, we're even rejoicing that we are attaining 1.2 million barrels per day, while OPEC is telling us to do about 1.6. We can't even meet what is expected. I think 1.8. We can't even meet what is expected of that quota. What's also your reaction to oil theft and efforts by government at the moment? It was 900 and something some weeks ago.
So with oil theft, last year we were appalled by the discoveries.
Yes, indeed, discoveries.
Some of the discoveries, we are appalled that we were just discovering, because there are things that have been in existence. And these are ways that we have been bled over the years. When you think about it and the effects on the economy, it's disastrous. But then think about the cartel or the industry itself. Because oil theft isn't something that you carry little oil away in jerry cans. It's a real massive endeavor. It's a massive crime. It's a massive initiative.
Honestly,
to actually do this. So for the fact that everybody's turning a blind eye, it's a big problem. That means what else are we turning a blind eye to? So oil theft, you're right, is reducing our ability to meet up our quota. So we need to deal with it. I think perhaps with all the talk happening, there was a lot of information in the media about it. We organized a seminar with stakeholders discussing this issue and saying, how do we tackle it? And we presented our findings to government, because we believe that this is one way that government can make significant savings, and we can actually shoot up our revenue with, if we can deal with this. And we can deal with it, but it requires a lot of political will to actually say this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to deal with it. But the business community is waiting. We are expecting that perhaps, if nothing has been done so far, that with the new government, that we can see some action in that direction. And once you have a government that is willing to act, then it will reduce. It will start to reduce. Naturally. It may not be limited in the first instance, but it will begin to reduce.
Naturally. I like that word political will, because it's what is really needed to address this. Now, let's talk about the business community again. Staying with the business community, of course, that is where you operate. And talking about manufacturers now, going down to them. They're actually feeling this hit so badly, as much as others, not just them. But regards to Forex and all of them, for those that have to import materials, I've seen a series of reports from the LCCI, of course, from your office, talking about how this has affected businesses and is affecting moving on. What is your take with regards to the manufacturing sector with all of this myriads of challenges, hiking diesel price? I can go on and on.
Yeah. It's sad.
It is really sad.
You see, in most economies, the sectors that we have that are contracting are really sectors that boost the economy. So last year, as we did a review before the outlook, we realized that the manufacturing sector and the oil and gas sector contracted. These are two sectors that we should actually be doing a lot with. Now, with the manufacturing sector, yes, you're right. The sector is bedeviled with a lot of problems, and Nigerians are facing it. I mean, well, we see it happening. They're not able to get inputs. You have problem with road network. Even getting raw materials from the farm to the factory is a challenge. Power is a big problem. We slept one night and woke up the following morning. The price of diesel has gone from like 250 to 300 to almost 1,000. That is a challenge. The manufacturers are the ones getting their water, they're generating power, they're doing, so it's such a burden. This means that not only are we not able to service the domestic market, yes, we are not able to export. One of the ways that we can increase our revenue is to get more forex earnings. But we're not able to export because we have all of these challenges that make our manufacturing sector not competitive at all anywhere. So if I bring my goods and somebody in Ghana or someone in another country bring that, we are so much more expensive because of all the costs layered, yes, on the product. So it is a definite challenge that we need to deal with because we have to help the manufacturing sector. A lot of the informal sector is around that manufacturing, industrialization, helping, because it also employs a lot of people. Now we're thinking about the youth and what we do with them. Mm. If we get our manufacturing sector working well, if we get our industrialization strategy upright, we'll be able to employ our youth. We'll be able to, do so much more, increase our revenue and, support government. As the organized private sector, we want to contribute to national development. We want to contribute to the economy, but we are constrained. We're like the people running a race with their hands tied behind. It's so difficult. But yeah, we're looking that government will change some of those things.
Let's talk about monetary policy now, which of course affects businesses. We've seen inflation stay so much on the high side, more than 20%, about 21% at the moment. We are waiting anytime soon to get that for December. And obviously it will be high, this, because looking at all of this. But what we've seen central banks do is to try to rein in inflation with hike in rates, which the central bank has been doing. I think we are on about 15.5% at the moment, and it's likely that there might be a shift again in this meeting that we expect to hold anytime soon. But many say this seems not to be reining in inflation. What's the LCCI saying about the present kind of inflation that we have, and what could be the possible solutions?
So in other climates, hiking rates contributes to reduce inflation. It does have an impact. Okay. But it can only have an impact when we deal with other elements that contribute to inflation. Right now, we just spoke about the manufacturing sector and all the challenges that they are facing. If we're not able to deal with some of this power, security, if we don't deal with security, if the climate is not conducive enough for businesses to run, then that's a challenge. So we have to deal with all of these indicators. We have to be able to provide funding or support for manufacturers to produce. We have to figure out how can we provide what they need to get inputs, raw material inputs coming in. It's difficult for them to get forex to import raw materials today. So if these are the challenges, no matter how much you increase the rates, it's not going to help with inflation. And as the inflation rises, the value of resources is is reduced. The purchasing power is reduced, and it dampens everything. Yes. And so the economy isn't able to rise and do what it needs to do. So that's the challenge we face. So when we look at the budget today, some of the assumptions I think are ambitious, but I'm like, we need to do a lot of other things to propel things forward.
Indeed. That budget, many say that when you look at some of the assumptions there, especially the forex and maybe expectations with regards to crude, is something that some say is a tall order. But let's talk about this cashless economy thing. It's top in the news, and I'm sure you're aware that the central bank has introduced the new notes. We are yet to get anyway, I was able to get some yesterday, so let me say it on television.
Can I have some?
Okay, I was able to get some yesterday, but many are complaining, and it's just a few days to 31st of January. My worry is for those with the small businesses that trade day to day. If a day before you say, I cannot put my money into the bank anymore and I have those notes, what happens to them? That's one question. Then do you think that all is set to implement this? Do we have that capacity to run this cashless policy seamlessly?
So your worry is not my worry.
I definitely know it should be.
That the small businesses will struggle, but also those in the rural areas. So we in Lagos are complaining. I haven't seen the new notes. So we in Lagos, we are complaining that we haven't seen it. We've gone to ATM, we can't get it. Somebody said yesterday that they went across the desk, the counter, they told them, oh, no, you can only get it from the ATM. So these are challenges, right? Where they have the capacity, CBN will have to answer that. But from where I sit and what I see is pretty difficult to ensure that we all have it in our hands and we have exchanged it before the 31st. I think the Senate has called on the central bank to try and kind of review the deadline. They will decide what they want to do. When I heard on Monday, I think that central bank said they were going to start sensitization, I said to myself, why are we starting sensitization now? I mean, really. So it's important that we are clear what are the plans to get this done. Yeah, and what are the milestones? Have we made the milestones? I don't know what the milestones were with the central bank, but if people don't know how important it is to make the exchange and they can't even get where to exchange, it will be a problem. There's also the kind of human rights aspect to it. Do I have a right to decide that I want to have a bank account or not? That's my, I can decide not to. So why am I being forced that I have to have a bank account before I do anything and all that? So, but basically, yes, the small businesses will suffer. Majority of the SMEs are in the informal sector. And they are really like the cash people. It's everyday, daily cash in, cash out. And so this is, apart from the fact that it creates a panic in the system.
Yeah, it does.
And that is frustrating. When the issue of the new Naira note came out, we actually put out a statement from the LCCI, just warning about some of these issues. This is election period, and we're going to the Christmas period, and you put out a policy like this, and it's just the problems that it creates in the system that, people then start to hold on or change into dollar, and then, how does that even affect you? So I don't know. The central bank will need to come out and say, perhaps, what are their intentions? Are they achieving what they want to achieve as of today? And, is the time left enough for them to do what they need to do? I haven't heard any statement from the CBN. I've heard a few more, okay, we're going to do this. But have they said, we have enough, this is enough time, and these are the things that we need to do, and we have done it all? We have how many states in the country? Have they gone to all the rural areas? Because these are the ones that you actually need. If we in the city haven't seen the money, I worry.
Honestly, something is wrong somewhere. But like you said, we'll wait for the CBN to clear the air. But they are saying that they're still going ahead. But let's see how it plays out. Before we wrap up, a very interesting conversation, I must say. Before we wrap up, let's talk about the agricultural sector, which we see that this government, many would say, there's a lot of focus on agriculture. We've seen CBN too coming through for government with all of the agricultural initiatives that we've seen. The common one, the farmers, the anchor borrowers, I can go on and on, the rice farmers. We've seen lots and lots of efforts. But later we also see flood coming to devastate, all of these processes and plans. Now, what is your take with regards to Nigeria's agricultural sector, maybe where we used to be and with all of these efforts, but can we do better?
I think the answer to the question is in the question. We can definitely do better. There's always room for improvement. But that the room is so large to improve really today, because if I look at, so agri is one of the sectors that's marginally increased. Okay, and we need to then make sure that that expansion continues. There are so many special export zones and warehousing projects that we need to support to ensure that the agri sector flourishes. Because if we can feed ourselves first, then things will be a bit better, and then we think exports. But that sector needs to be supported. There's a wide range in terms of its value chain, and we need to support, each of them within that chain. At the LCCI, we have an agri group, and we are constantly having those conversations on how to improve practices within the agri sector, how to manage risk in the agri sector. With the flooding, that was a disaster that we saw, but we're hoping that now we have learned. We'll go back and think through our environmental management strategies in this country and ensure that this can happen again, but we'll be prepared if it happens again, hopefully.
Finally, what is your message to members of the business community? Yes, LCCI has been doing a lot, advocacy and all of that, but there's some message of hope at this time because everyone is bothered and waiting for who becomes the next CEO. What's the message to the business community at this time, all of those challenges that they face?
I am hopeful too. Any transition, any change, it's time to be as optimistic as possible. So I'm saying let's hang in here, let's wait for that change to happen, but let's do our bit. In the different sectors and the walks of life that we are, let's do our bit. Also, please get your PVC. It is your power to make a change. So that's the message I'll leave to the business
Almost,
community.
thank you so much. Dr. Chinyere Amona, she is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Well, it's the first live appearance of her on the show. She's been here before via Zoom. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming through. What it's like in Lagos, from the island to the mainland. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tolu. I appreciate you having me.